The morning air was thick with the scent of diesel and sawdust at the Allied Timber and Supply Warehouse in Lexington, Kentucky. It was just past 6:30 a.m. when Jessica Moore arrived, dressed in faded combat camouflage pants, a plain black T-shirt, tucked in neatly, and steel-toe boots polished enough to reflect sunlight. Her hair was tied back in a strict military bun, and her face carried the kind of calm you find in people who've seen storms and learned to walk straight through them. Inside the warehouse, morning chatter mixed with the rumble of forklifts and the clang of pallets being dropped onto the concrete floor. A few men leaned against crates, sipping coffee, eyes narrowing when Jessica walked in. Her camo pants didn't go unnoticed. "Looks like someone forgot Halloween ended." One of them chuckled, another smirked. "Hey, G.I. Jane, you planning to invade aisle 6? Laughter followed, not cruel, but mocking enough to sting. Jessica heard it all. She always did. She didn't flinch. She simply nodded politely and moved past them, clocking in without a word. Her body language gave nothing away. No reaction, no defense, no anger. Just presence. Controlled. Intentional. Like everything she did. It was her first week at Allied. She had taken the job after leaving the Army Reserve. She needed time to recalibrate, time away from flight controls, classified briefings, and the constant weight of responsibility. Warehouse work was honest, simple, physical. It gave her space. But what she hadn't expected, or maybe what she'd hoped she'd finally grown out of, was the smirking doubt, the disbelief, the quiet, nagging sexism. It was 2025, and somehow, the same old game was still in play. A woman in camo wasn't taken seriously unless she was holding a gun or posing for a photo op. And Jessica wasn't interested in either. By noon, she had already outpaced half the team in crate stacking, logging, and stock organizing. She worked with precision. No wasted movement. She had memorized the layout of the entire warehouse in under 24 hours. She could calculate weight distribution faster than the foreman software. But none of it mattered. Every time she offered a solution, a shortcut, or a better process, the response was always the same. "Thanks, Moore, but we've been doing it this way for years. You stick to logging inventory. Let the guys handle the heavy stuff." Once, when she volunteered to operate a small crane, the crew burst into laughter. "You sure you can lift that with your Barbie arms?" Someone joked. Jessica didn't argue. She didn't explain that she had once lifted wounded soldiers from under enemy fire while piloting a 16,000-pound UH-60 Black Hawk. She didn't tell them she'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan and had over 300 flight hours logged in high-stress, zero-visibility operations. She didn't need to prove anything, but what they didn't know, what they couldn't see through their stereotypes, was that Jessica didn't wear those camo pants out of nostalgia. She wore them as armor, a quiet shield against a world that still hadn't learned how to look past appearances. She remembered her final mission in Kabul. Her squad had been ambushed, pinned behind a burning Humvee. The extraction zone had shifted, and radio contact was breaking. Jessica had overridden orders, navigated through hostile fire, and landed the Black Hawk just feet from her team. She got them out, every last one. She remembered the heat, the shaking metal beneath her boots, the screaming rotors, and the calm she found in the chaos. That mission had earned her a Bronze Star. None of that fit on her resume at Allied Timber. After lunch, she was assigned to work beside Kyle, a fresh-faced forklift trainee who kept sneaking curious glances at her. Unlike the others, Kyle hadn't laughed when she walked in that morning. He was observant, but quiet, and she appreciated that. "You ever serve?" he asked cautiously as they moved crates together. Jessica paused, just for a breath. "Something like that," she said, then nodded toward the next stack. Let's finish this row before they send another truck in. Kyle didn't push. But from that moment, something changed in his eyes. The rest of the crew remained in their echo chamber. After all, it was easier to joke about her boots and cargo pants than to ask who she really was. People rarely want to peel back layers they've already labeled. By the time the shift ended, Jessica had reorganized an entire section of mislabeled freight and solved 2 inventory discrepancies without being asked. Her supervisor didn't notice. The team didn't say thanks. But Kyle lingered by the lockers. "You're different," he said. Jessica tilted her head. "Different how?" "I don't know. You walk like you're waiting for orders that never come. Like you're still flying or something." She smiled faintly, not in amusement, but in recognition. For the first time, someone had seen a piece of her. Not the camo, not the boots, but the rhythm, the readiness, the wiring that never truly leaves those who've served. "Maybe I am," she said. Kyle nodded, understanding more than he let on. As he walked off, Jessica tied her boots tighter and glanced up at the sky, as if listening for distant rotors. They laughed at her today. Let them. Tomorrow was coming, and so was the Black Hawk. By the 3rd week, Jessica had learned the routine. The warehouse woke up slow, like an old machine needing oil, and by 10 a.m., the jokes would start flying again. They always did. Different faces, same punchlines. "Careful, guys," one said while hoisting a pallet. "We've got special ops on the floor today." Jessica walked past them in silence, holding a clipboard tighter than she needed to. Her knuckles turned white, but her face never did. She'd been through worse than this. Much worse. Words bounced off her. Still, they hit in ways they couldn't see. "More," the supervisor called. "Stick to the logs today. Let the boys handle the heavy loads." There it was again. Let the boys handle it. The irony didn't escape her. In Kandahar, she'd been the one flying into chaos while some of these men had been safe at home, complaining about slow internet and late pizzas. But here, she was the outsider, the woman with something to prove, not by her own doing, but because that's what the job expected of her. The locker room was worse. That's where whispers became words, and words became snickers. She thinks. She's hard. Probably never even saw a gun. Bet those pants came from a thrift shop. She's trying too hard. That's always a red flag. One day, someone drew a crude helicopter on the break room whiteboard and labeled it Moore's Uber. The laughter echoed off the walls like they'd struck gold. Jessica saw it. Wiped it off without a word. Didn't even blink. Kyle watched. From the corner. He'd been paying attention since day one, and what he saw disturbed him. It wasn't just the teasing. It was the fact that she never cracked. Not once. Her hands never shook. Her pace never slowed. She didn't react, didn't defend, didn't retaliate. It was the kind of control you didn't just learn. You lived it. Kyle was young, just 19, still figuring out what respect looked like. But something about Jessica made him want to be better, sharper. She didn't ask for loyalty, but he found himself giving it anyway. Later that evening, curiosity got the best of him. He typed Jessica Moore, pilot, into the search bar on his phone. Within seconds, an image popped. UPUS Army Captain Jessica Moore, Black Hawk pilot. Afghanistan veteran. Bronze Star recipient. 2 deployments. Medivac specialist. The kind of soldier they made movies about, but never like this. Kyle stared at the screen in disbelief. The calm woman who stocked shelves and got mocked every morning had once flown into gunfire to pull wounded soldiers out of hell. She wasn't just in the military. She was the military. He scrolled further and found a video clip from a local news segment 2 years ago. Jessica stood in uniform beside a Black Hawk, giving a short, composed interview after landing in Tennessee. during a disaster relief operation. The woman in the clip was the same, stoic, steady. But now, her silence made sense. Kyle sat with it a long time. The next morning, he didn't say anything. Just worked beside her with a different posture, more alert, more respectful. Jessica noticed. "You all right?" she asked during their second load. "Yeah," he said a little too quickly, and added, "I looked you up." She paused, lowering a crate slowly. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, there was something behind them. Not warning, but understanding. "You're not the first," she said. Kyle nodded. "Why don't you say anything?" She shrugged. What would it change? He opened his mouth but had no answer. That day, he didn't laugh when the others joked. Didn't join in when they cracked wise about her boots or called her Sergeant Sassy. He started deflecting, changing the subject, moving crates faster so she wouldn't have to deal with the crew as long. Jessica never asked for it, but she appreciated the shift. Still, the warehouse remained what it was, a place where gossip and pride mingled like smoke in the rafters. Her supervisor remained dismissive. The crew remained blind. But Kyle wasn't the same. One afternoon, a delivery truck arrived early, throwing off the entire loading schedule. Pallets were misaligned. Data wasn't updated, and the shipping floor descended into controlled chaos. As voices rose and tempers flared, Jessica stepped forward. "Give me 10 minutes, she said. The foreman laughed. "What are you going to do? Drill Sergeant us into order?" But Kyle nodded toward her. Let her try. In 9 minutes, she had rerouted the workflow, reorganized the crates, and updated the logs by hand. The delivery was salvaged, the system restored. And yet, not a single thank you. Later, as the team clocked out, someone muttered, "She acts like she's still in boot camp." Jessica overheard. She almost responded this time. Almost. But then she saw Kyle nod toward her quietly. Just a slight, respectful motion. That was enough. That night, Kyle went home and printed the article he'd read. Taped it inside his locker door. He wasn't sure what he was going to do with the knowledge yet. But one thing was clear. They could laugh. All they wanted. He knew who she was now. And one way or another, so would everyone else. The article inside Kyle's locker became a secret monument. He didn't show anyone. Not yet. It wasn't his story to tell. But each morning, before he stepped into the noisy, snide chaos of Allied timber, he read the headline, Captain Jessica Moore, the quiet hero behind the rotors. It grounded him. Reminded him that perception and truth often ran on separate tracks. The woman the others mocked was the same woman who had landed a Black Hawk under enemy fire to save an entire patrol. He couldn't unsee it now. And more importantly, he couldn't ignore it. On Friday, Kyle approached her again. This time, while they were refueling a forklift behind the main warehouse. "I read more about you," he said quietly. "That mission in Wardic province? The one with the burned-out convoy." Jessica looked over, surprised. "You went deep." He shrugged. "Wanted to know who I was working beside." Her eyes softened just slightly, the military cool melting. For a moment, most people don't bother. "They should," Kyle said. Jessica nodded slowly. "They will, eventually." A pause. The distant roar of engines filled the silence. Kyle hesitated, then asked, "Why here?" "I mean, why this job?" Jessica didn't answer right away. She stared at the horizon like it still held memories. "Needed something normal," she said. "Something quiet. A place where I didn't have to be Captain Moore. Just Jessica." Kyle frowned. "They don't even see you here." "I know," she replied. "But I see them. And I see what's broken. You can't fix something until you've seen it fall apart." He didn't fully understand, but he nodded anyway. That afternoon, something shifted. Kyle started speaking up more. When someone made a dumb joke about Jessica's camo, he asked, "You think that's funny?" And when one of the guys mocked her boots again, Kyle simply said, "She's faster than all of you combined, so maybe shut up and try to catch up." It caught them off guard. Not because of what Kyle said, but how he said it. Confident, certain, like he knew something they didn't. Which, of course, he did. And it didn't take long for curiosity to spread. On Monday morning, another worker named Rico asked Kyle, "What's up with you and Moore? You got a crush or something?" Kyle smirked. "Nah, I just respect soldiers, don't you?" Rico rolled his eyes. "She's a soldier?" Kyle didn't say anything else. He just walked away. By Wednesday, 2 more crew members had Googled her name. The article was spreading, not publicly, but like fire through dry grass. Quiet, invisible, but undeniable. And with it came small but noticeable changes. The jokes became less frequent, the glances more cautious. One guy even asked, "So, she really flew one of those helicopters?" Cal responded with a question of his own. "You ever saved a life under fire?" Silence. Jessica noticed the shift. Noticed the way their eyes lingered longer, and the way conversations paused when she walked past. The respect wasn't open. Not yet, but the disrespect was shrinking. Still, she said nothing. Then came the forklift accident. It was a routine day. Boxes stacked, forms signed. Sun baking the asphalt just beyond the bay doors. Jessica was assisting near the rear dock when a mechanical failure caused a pallet jack to snap. A tower of lumber began to tilt, teetering like it was falling. In slow motion, screams. Chaos. One of the workers, Jamal, was pinned by his leg. Another was too close to move. Everyone froze, except Jessica. She sprinted across the floor, barking orders as if a switch had flipped. "Shut the lines. Pull the emergency. You call it in now. Kyle, give me your belt." In seconds, she wrapped the belt around Jamal's upper thigh, turning it into a makeshift tourniquet. Blood soaked the concrete, but she stayed calm. "Stay with me, Jamal. You're going to be fine. Look at me. Just breathe." The others stood motionless, watching her work with the composure of a field surgeon and the clarity of a squad leader. Kyle helped pull crates away from the injured worker, his hands trembling as he followed her orders without hesitation. When paramedics arrived, they found Jessica still holding pressure on the wound, directing traffic and organizing clearance space. Like she'd been doing it her whole life, because she had. Afterward, the medic looked at her and asked, "Military?" Jessica nodded once. "Yes, sir." He nodded back. Figured. Word spread fast. By lunchtime, the whole warehouse was buzzing, not with jokes, but with questions. "Did you see what she did?" She knew exactly what to do. She saved his leg, maybe even his life. Someone finally asked out loud, "Who is she?" That night, Kyle printed extra copies of the article, taped them around the break room before anyone arrived the next morning. He didn't sign his name. He didn't have to. Jessica saw them when she walked in. At first, she froze. Then she smiled, just slightly, and walked straight past them, head high, shoulders square. Let them see. Let them finally see. The warehouse smelled like bleach and steel the morning after the accident. The bloodstains on the rear dock had been scrubbed, but no one could scrub the memory of what had happened. Jamal was stable at the hospital. Doctors said that had it not been for the immediate pressure and fast tourniquet, he might have lost the leg, or worse. Everyone knew who had saved him. Jessica didn't talk about it. She showed up the same time as always, wore the same camo pants, and went about her duties without a word. But the warehouse was different now. Quieter, sharper, respectful. The jokes had stopped completely. Guys, who'd never made eye contact. Before now nodded when she passed. Some even helped her with lifts. The woman they once mocked as G.I. Jane had become the reason one of their own would walk again. No one dared call her that anymore, even the supervisor, Doug Harrell. A man who had barely looked up from his clipboard when she spoke stood awkwardly near her workstation that morning. Clearing his throat, he finally said, "Heard what you did yesterday. ENT said you kept him from bleeding out." Jessica kept working. "I just did what needed doing." Doug shifted his weight. "Yeah, well, good job." It wasn't much, but from him it was a full-blown speech. Kyle, meanwhile, watched everything with quiet satisfaction. He knew that moment had changed the tide. People might not say it, but they finally saw her, not just as a woman in camo, but as a warrior who'd walked through war zones and kept walking. That afternoon, a local news crew showed up. They weren't there by accident. Someone, anonymous, but almost certainly Kyle, had tipped them off. The journalist, a soft-spoken woman named Rachel Deering, asked to speak with Jessica during lunch break. Jessica was hesitant at first. She didn't like attention. That's why she'd stayed quiet since leaving active duty. But Rachel wasn't pushy, and she wasn't there for gossip. She had read the military articles, had even seen the footage from Kandahar. She just wanted to know why Jessica had chosen this life. Post-service. Jessica finally agreed. Sitting on the back of a delivery truck, she answered questions calmly. "I didn't come here to impress anyone," she said. "I came here to build something with my hands. I came here because it's honest work. I didn't expect to be treated special, but I also didn't expect to be laughed at. Not for wearing the uniform I still respect." Rachel blinked, visibly moved. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. Jessica looked out over the parking lot. Forklifts parked in jagged lines, crew members pretending not to listen, Kyle watching from a distance. "No," she said simply. "Everywhere I've been, every mission I flew, every insult I've swallowed, it all taught me something. I didn't come here to be celebrated, but I won't be invisible either." The interview was short, just a few minutes. But by the next morning, it was already online. From Black Hawk to Blue Collar, the war hero who stays silent no more. The story hit like a lightning bolt. By noon, the break room TV had it playing on a loop. Jessica's face, half-shadowed by the truck's awning, appeared over and over as she calmly explained her silence and her story. The video was shared among local Facebook groups, veterans pages, even a few national outlets. Kyle watched the reactions unfold in real time. Rico leaned over and said, "Man, we had no idea." "No," Kyle said, "you didn't." Others nodded slowly. "No jokes now, just shame and awe." One older worker, Travis, who had once laughed the loudest, walked up to Jessica mid-shift. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I was ignorant, and I judged you wrong." Jessica stared at him for a moment, then said, "Apology accepted. Just don't do it to the next one." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Fair enough." Later, during a company meeting hastily assembled by management, Doug made a rare announcement. "We've all seen the news, and many of us owe Ms. Moore some overdue respect. From this point forward, Jessica will be assisting in safety operations and emergency readiness. She's overqualified, frankly, and we're lucky to have her." There was no applause, just the sound of realization settling in. Jessica didn't smile, didn't grandstand. She just stood up, thanked him, and sat back down. Kyle leaned over. "About time," he whispered. She gave a faint smirk. "Let's see how long it lasts." That afternoon, she walked the floor like usual, but eyes followed her now, not with doubt, but with admiration. She heard no whispers, Only work. By the end of the day, Kyle asked her something bold. Do you ever miss it? Flying, I mean. She paused. Every day. He nodded. Would you go back? She looked up at the ceiling, where dust motes floated. In beams of sun, maybe someday. But some battles are fought down here too. And as she walked away, Kyle had a thought he couldn't shake. She wasn't just a hero from another life. She was still one now. By Friday morning, the story had traveled far beyond Allied Timber's dusty warehouse walls. The video of Jessica's quiet interview now had over 2 million views. Military pages, veteran forums, and women in service advocacy groups were sharing it by the hour. Her calm voice, her honest words, and the quiet strength in her posture had struck a chord with people all over the country. At Allied, things were different now. Not just in behavior, but in energy. Jessica's name was spoken with reverence. The same workers who once laughed now carried themselves more carefully around her. Some started asking real questions. Not mocking, not invasive. Curious. What was it like flying in combat? Did you ever get scared? Why'd you come back to work here? Jessica answered only when she felt like it. She never offered stories. But if someone asked with respect, she gave them something real. Kyle noticed she'd stopped hiding. She still didn't brag, but she didn't shrink either. She carried herself like a soldier again, one who didn't need to be invisible. One morning, the CEO of Allied's parent company flew in from Chicago. He shook Jessica's hand, thanked her personally, and presented a framed certificate of appreciation. It was corporate and shallow, but sincere in tone. Jessica accepted it with a nod and said nothing more than, I'm just doing my job. What she didn't know was that the recognition had sparked something bigger. Across the state. A Veterans Day committee was meeting in nearby Frankfurt, planning their annual ceremony, normally a small event with little fanfare. But this year, they wanted something different, something powerful. And someone on the board had seen the viral clip. She's perfect, one member said. Quiet, humble, decorated. We've never honored a female Black Hawk pilot before. Another leaned in. What if we brought the bird in for her, just once? Silence. Then nods. Calls were made. Permissions were cleared. And quietly, behind the scenes, a plan began to form. Meanwhile, Jessica remained focused on work. She was now part of the company's safety team. She ran monthly drills, taught basic first aid, reorganized evacuation maps. She had turned a once mocked position into one of silent leadership. Even Doug, who once barely acknowledged her, now asked her advice on workflow logistics. And still, every Friday, she wore her camo pants. Not because she had to, because she chose to. You ever think about going back? Kyle asked one afternoon as they finished restocking the back wall. Jessica exhaled slowly. To flying? Yeah, all the time. So why don't you? She looked out over the warehouse floor. Forklifts humming, crates moving, men and women following her plans without even realizing it. Because there's something to be said for fighting battles in the places no one's looking, she said. For fixing culture instead of just complaining about it. Kyle understood. That night, while scrolling through his phone, Kyle came across a teaser article. Local veteran to be honored in statewide Veterans Day event. Helicopter tribute. Rumored, no name was mentioned, but he knew. The next day, the warehouse buzzed again. A new kind of tension. Rumors spread fast. Someone said the Army's flying a chopper into the fairgrounds. Heard it's for a ceremony. No way they'd do that unless it was big. Jessica pretended not to hear it. But deep down, something stirred. Army never did anything without reason. One afternoon, Rachel, the same reporter who'd interviewed her, returned with a camera crew and a grin. They want to honor you next week, she said, with a formal fly-in. You'll be the guest of honor at the Veterans Day gathering in Frankfurt. Military's flying a Black Hawk just for you." Jessica blinked. "What? You didn't know?" Jessica shook her head. Rachel hesitated. "They were trying to surprise you." Jessica sat down slowly on a crate. A memory flashed. The deafening roar of rotors, the whine of the engine, the ground shaking as she lifted wounded men from dust and flames. She hadn't been near a Black Hawk in over a year. "They really want to do that?" she asked quietly. Rachel smiled. "You earned it. Whether you like it or not, the world's finally seeing you." Word spread faster than wildfire this time. No one joked. The same guys who used to mock her now asked what time the chopper was coming. They asked if they could watch. They asked if they could bring their kids. Doug posted a company-wide email saying the entire crew would be released early to attend. And Kyle, for the first time since meeting her, saw Jessica look nervous. "You okay?" he asked. "I've faced mortar fire," she said. "I've landed under RPG threat, but I've never had to walk toward a crowd who laughed at me and accept their cheers." Kyle smiled. "Then I guess this'll be the hardest landing you've ever made." She smirked. "Probably." That weekend, Jessica polished her boots, ironed her uniform, pulled out her old flight jacket, still smelling faintly of oil, dust, and adrenaline. She didn't know what the ceremony would bring, but she knew this. When the Black Hawk arrived, it wouldn't just be for show. It would be a symbol of silence, broken of strength, seen and of a woman in camo, finally seen for who she truly was. The sky over Frankfurt was pale and windless that morning, the kind of November air that smelled like cold metal and dry leaves. Crowds were already gathering at the fairgrounds by 8 a.m., bundled in coats and hats, sipping coffee and murmuring, as they waited for the ceremony to begin. But the warehouse crew from Allied Timber wasn't murmuring. They stood in a loose group near the back, unusually quiet. Even Rico had nothing sarcastic to say. Travis looked uncomfortable in a tie. Doug clutched a program and kept glancing around like he wasn't sure he should be there. Kyle stood beside Jessica, who wore her full Army service uniform. Her boots were mirror-shined, her medals aligned with perfect precision. Her name tag read Moore, sharp, bold, simple. She didn't say much, just stood still, her jaw tight, eyes focused on the empty sky, like she was waiting for something she could already hear. In the distance, and then a hum, barely noticeable at first, then louder, then unmistakable. Whoomp, whoomp, WHOMP. Heads turned. Children pointed. Phones came out. The Black Hawk appeared over the tree line like a ghost made of thunder. Sleek, powerful, controlled. The blades roared above the crowd, kicking up dust and leaves as it slowed into a wide arc over the fairgrounds. Sunlight flashed off its black steel skin. The pilot circled once, textbook, then descended slowly into the clearing behind the stage. The ground shook. Flags snapped in the wind. Hats blew off. Everyone backed up except Jessica. She stepped forward. The crowd parted without being told. All eyes locked on her. The once laughed at woman in camo now moved like a force of nature, calm and certain, like this was her element. Because it was. The Black Hawk landed with practiced precision. The rotors whined, slowing as the hatch opened. From inside, a crew member stepped out and saluted. "Captain Moore," he said, "we're honored to have you back." Jessica returned the salute with flawless form. It was the first time many in. The crowd saw her that way, not as a worker, not as a mystery, but as a soldier. A real one, not a costume, not a story. A leader. She climbed aboard slowly, her boots clanging softly on the steel ramp. Inside, everything was familiar. The dials, the vibration in the floor, the the sharp scent of fuel and rubber. Her hands grazed the side of the cockpit. Kyle watched her disappear inside the bird. He'd never seen anything like it. For 10 minutes, the Black Hawk remained grounded, its rotors idle, while Jessica sat inside with the crew, catching up, laughing, softly, even signing the flight log. Then the pilot signaled. She stood and stepped out slowly. Applause erupted, not loud or chaotic, but deep, respectful. Earned. Jessica approached the stage, flanked by 2 veterans and a local congresswoman. Her face was calm, but her eyes shimmered in the sunlight. A lifetime of silence had just landed in a roar. The congresswoman stepped up to the mic. "Today, we honor Captain Jessica Moore, a veteran, a pilot, a hero, and a woman who chose humility over recognition, who chose quiet dignity over anger, and who reminded us that leadership doesn't always look like noise." More applause. Jessica stepped forward, accepting the plaque and the ceremonial coin. When offered the mic, she hesitated. She didn't like speeches. She liked action. But this moment demanded something. So she spoke. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for this honor, but for finally seeing what was always there." She paused, then continued. "I didn't save lives overseas so I could be praised at home. I did it because it was my duty. And when I left the military, I didn't stop serving. I just changed uniforms. You don't need a cockpit to lead. Sometimes leadership is sweeping the warehouse floor without complaint. Sometimes it's biting your tongue until people open their eyes." She glanced toward the Allied timber crew. Most looked down, ashamed. Then she smiled. "But sometimes people change. And that's what today is really about. Not me. Us. Growth." She stepped back. No grand ending. No dramatic salute. Just truth. After the ceremony, crowds approached her one by one, children asking for pictures, veterans offering hugs, strangers saying thank you. Kyle stayed back, letting it all unfold. But eventually, Jessica made her way to him. "You okay?" she asked. He laughed. "I'm not sure how to talk to you now." She smirked. "Same way you always did, with respect." He nodded. "You think they'll keep treating you differently?" She looked around, at the crew, the reporters, the swirling dust still floating from the chopper's landing. "They'll never forget this," she said. As they walked back toward the parking lot, the Black Hawk lifted behind them, rising slowly into the sky. No one laughed this time, because now they all knew exactly who she was. The warehouse felt different after that day. There was no official policy change, no HR memo, no mandatory meeting. But something had shifted, something invisible but undeniable. It wasn't just the way people looked at Jessica Moore anymore. It was the way they looked at each other. Respect. That was the word. It had returned to the building like a wind, like a wind blowing open every closed door. No more side glances when she walked by in her camo. No more whispered jokes behind her back. No more pretending she was just the quiet one. Now, when Jessica spoke, people listened. And when she didn't, they still watched, curious, thoughtful, even inspired. 2 weeks after the ceremony, Doug Horrell called a team meeting. It wasn't his style. But even he couldn't ignore the wave Jessica had started. He stood at the front of the break room in his usual flannel shirt, cleared his throat, and said, "We're going to launch a new emergency response program here, based on some recent lessons." All eyes went to Jessica, who sat quietly with her arms crossed. Doug continued. Moores agreed to help lead the training. CPR, triage, evacuation drills. Real stuff. Not just fire extinguishers and posters. Kyle leaned over to Rico. "That might be the first good idea Doug's had in 5 years." Rico nodded. probably because it wasn't his idea. Jessica didn't care who got credit. What mattered was that her skills, the ones she'd honed in helicopters over war zones, were now being used to make people safer here. And not just in theory. Jamal, now walking with a brace, had asked to assist her. Said he owed her that much. In the weeks that followed, the floor changed. People worked together more smoothly. Arguments that once flared up now diffused quickly. There was more laughter, not at someone's expense, but the kind that came from genuine camaraderie. Jessica had become something rare, a silent leader whose actions had rippled far beyond her own life. And then something happened that surprised even her. Travis, the same man who used to joke about her army muscles, started coming in early. At first, she thought it was coincidence. Then she noticed he was always near her station, asking questions, watching her work, taking notes. One morning, he caught her alone and said, "I signed up for a night class. Logistics certification." She raised an eyebrow. "I figure, if someone like you can take a step down to work here," he said, "then I can take a step up." Jessica stared at him for a second, then offered a rare smile. "Good," she said. "Don't waste your time doing less than you're capable of." He nodded, eyes low. "I won't." It wasn't a big speech, but it didn't need to be. Word spread quickly that Travis, the most old school of them all, had changed. If he could admit he'd misjudged her, anyone could. The warehouse began hosting monthly safety drills. Jessica led them with quiet authority. She never yelled, never showed off. But her instructions were precise, her patience unshakable. Even the new hires knew within a day. If you wanted to learn how to work right, stick close to more. Kyle noticed something else, too. People weren't just asking her about safety or work. They were asking about her story. Young women on the team, especially. One intern named Melissa cornered Jessica during break and asked, "Is it true you flew in Afghanistan?" Jessica didn't brag. She simply nodded. Melissa lit up. "My brother wants to enlist. Can I ask you what it's really like?" Jessica didn't flinch. She pulled up a chair and began to talk. Wordless leadership was still her style, but when she chose to speak, every word mattered. Kyle watched it all unfold like a ripple across a still pond. Jessica had never demanded a promotion, never begged to be liked. But by simply being who she was, solid, composed, relentless, she had changed the DNA of the place. Late one Friday evening, as the crew clocked out, Jessica stayed behind to close the back dock. Kyle walked over, leaning on the railing beside her. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "I've had offers," she finally said. After that article and the Black Hawk deal, a few veterans programs reached out. Even got a call from the National Guard. Said I could consult. "Will you?" She stared out over the shipping yard, the sky glowing orange over stacks of timber. "I might. Someday." Kyle nodded. "But not yet," she added. He smiled. "Why not?" She turned to him. "Because this place still needs fixing." The sun slipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the ground. And in that quiet moment, Kyle understood something. Jessica Moore didn't need a uniform to lead a mission. This warehouse, these people, were her mission now. And she wasn't done yet. 3 months after the Black Hawk landed, the warehouse ran smoother than it ever had. Injuries were down. Output was up. People talked to each other instead of yelling. Jessica Moore was still the same, calm, efficient, precise. But now, when she walked by, heads nodded with respect instead of turning away in dismissal. One cold January morning, she found a letter in her locker. No return address. Just her name, handwritten in tight, formal script. She opened it slowly. Captain Jessica Moore, on behalf of the U.S. Army Reserves, We would like to extend an offer for a leadership training role at Fort Leonard Wood. Your record, both military and civilian, has impressed our command. This role is vital. You'd be mentoring future officers. Full-time. Immediate. Relocation required. Jessica stared at the letter for a long time. Kyle found her at lunch, sitting alone, fingers drumming on the table. You okay? She slid the letter across the table. He read it once, then again. Wow, he said. That's big. Yeah, she said simply. You gonna take it? She didn't answer. The warehouse didn't know yet, but whispers had already started. Someone had spotted the letter on the printer. A few workers were already asking around. Everyone was curious. Everyone had a guess, but no one dared ask Jessica herself, not yet. Later that week, Doug approached her during a fire drill. I heard the Army's calling you back, he said, clearing his throat. Can't say I'm surprised. You're built for more than this place. Jessica raised an eyebrow. I mean that in a good way, he added, fumbling. She nodded. It's not about being built for more. It's about being useful where it counts. Doug looked at her, serious now. You've done more for this place in 3 months than I did in 5 years. If you go, we'll survive. But we'll go. Back to just getting by. It wasn't flattery. It was fact. That night, Jessica lay awake staring at her ceiling fan. The Army offer replayed in her mind, the rows of cadets she could mentor, the training grounds, the certainty of a structured life again. Salutes, command, purpose. But then she thought of Melissa, the intern who now walked with new confidence. Of Travis, studying for his logistics exam. Of Rico, who'd stopped mocking and started mentoring new hires. Of Jamal, helping with drills even though his limp hadn't fully healed. And she thought of the warehouse, still rough around the edges, still flawed, but trying, and needing her. That weekend, she drove to Fort Leonard Wood, met the officers, toured the base. They treated her like royalty. Crisp salutes, warm coffee, prepared paperwork. She stood on the tarmac, beside a row of incoming recruits. The commanding officer turned to her. This could be your view every morning. Jessica said nothing, because, in her heart, she was thinking of a different morning, the one where she stepped out of the Black Hawk back home and saw the shock in her coworkers' eyes. Not fear, not awe. Recognition. She returned home Sunday night. The town was quiet. The warehouse skyline rose in the distance. Not majestic, not grand, but familiar. Real. Monday morning, she walked in before sunrise. Put on her gloves. Clocked in. Picked up a broom. By 9 a.m., the warehouse buzzed with activity. No one asked her about the Army letter. But they were watching. At break, she stood up and cleared her throat. I want to say something, she began. The crew fell silent. I've made my decision, she said. The Army offered me a leadership post, officer training, a chance to shape new soldiers. Everyone waited. Jessica looked around at Travis, Melissa, Kyle, Jamal, even Doug, and I said no. Gasps. A few exchanged glances. One man whispered, why? Jessica continued, I realized I already have recruits. Right here. And you don't need uniforms to become better versions of yourselves. You just need someone who believes you can. There was a pause, then applause. Quiet at first, then steady, not out of celebration, out of gratitude. Kyle caught up to her afterward. You sure? He asked. You really passed it up? She looked at him with that same steady calm she always had. I didn't pass it up, she said. I chose this. Kyle smiled. You're still a captain, you know. Jessica smirked, always. From that day forward, the warehouse became something rare, not just a place of labor, but one of growth. Veterans came to speak at safety meetings. High schoolers shadowed the staff for career days. And once a month, Jessica led a workshop for women entering trade work. She never sought a title. She never wanted fame. But slowly, quietly, Jessica Moore became a local legend, the woman who could have flown anywhere, but chose to stay and lift the ground beneath her dot. And every now and then, on a windless afternoon, the town would hear it hoomp, 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 the sound of a Black Hawk passing overhead. Ah, reminder of the day she showed them all who she really was, and of the choice she made, not to rise above them, but to rise with them. Mission complete.